Join strategy and performance consultant Ryan Schaffer as he dives into the world of management consulting on Schmidt List. Discover how to adapt business strategies and navigate industry challenges, all while balancing innovation and collaboration. Let's dive in.
So Ryan, I educate my audience on the work you do and who you work with.
So I am a strategy and performance consultant. Another way of saying I'm kind of a rentable chief operating officer, or maybe a really business-leaning CIO, depending on the client and what they need. And that's always where it's about, kind of melding to whatever is important to them, given what they're facing in the marketplace or in the industry. So that's what we do. In this group a long time. So I've also been on the other side as an executive. And I like to say I walk in both light and darkness, and anybody can assign whichever one they want to whichever side, depending on your point of view, I'm sure. So
yeah, depending on which point in your career you're in, I'm guessing, right?
Indeed.
How did you make the transition into management consulting? Was it thrust into it? Did you trip and fall into it? Was this a big plan? Tell me about that transition for you.
I wish I could say it was part of some deep master plan that I've been plotting out, but it's been a little more random than that. I actually began my career in consulting. I started Dig 4 like an awful lot of people have on it. And what I wound up doing was over time, find an interesting company or concept that I really wanted to dive into. And then as things progressed, I'd get that urge to just step back and focus on solutioning and building things. That's the world of consulting. So I've stepped back and forth between them as we've gone. I think a lot of people find it interesting consulting, but until you go into it, you develop that comfort with the fact that you have no idea what's going on. When you're 25 feet underwater, it's a little bit of a different thing. It's exciting to be able to focus just on solution and your helping folks.
Well, we saw a big wave during the pandemic and shortly thereafter of a lot of people moving out of executive roles and into coaching and consulting type roles. I saw many peers transition during that time because they felt confident in their skill sets and that they can do the work remotely. So it made a lot of sense for folks to do that. So for those that maybe are listening and not exactly sure, how do you define management consulting and the type of work you do? What's the difference between contractor or a fractional person, or is there any difference between all of these nomenclatures people use if I'm interested in maybe pursuing this in the future?
There definitely is a difference. Management consulting is a broad term, and it does get applied to a lot of different areas. Then the organization I'm a part of, Ankara Consulting, has many different practice areas. There's strategy and performance folks like myself, through forensic accounting and some of the, there's two ways to specialize in consulting, and you'll see that in a lot of firms. There's horizontal specialization, so people that are implementation delivery experts across a lot of different areas. And there's vertical specializations, folks that really focus in on, healthcare is a good, for instance, and then sometimes, med device and other particulars within. To step back to your question, with consulting, there definitely are different pieces. The traditional tends to be more, you're on your own. You're engaged with a company just like you would be if you were using it full-time. It's a portion piece. Still tends to be applied to more executive roles, at least in my experience, where it's just people that hang out their own shingle in consulting. That's that kind of staff augmentation. And again, they're doing the same thing, to be more focused on a particular niche, project management, as a for instance. With management consulting, that tends to be more of a team sport, if you will. So we do not engage yet. Yes, I have a degree of expertise that I've accomplished over the years. I'm not an expert in everything, and nobody is. So a lot of my work is actually collaboration with other team members, maybe that the client isn't even aware are assigned or to the group, and they may not be billing per se, but they're my sounding boards. And that's how we get a 360 and get a really good solution for a client, as opposed to what's in my head, which is possible, I'm sure, depending on the day. So that's generally why I draw the difference between those two. Fractional, you've got one person, their expertise. Management consulting firms, you're drawing on a pool of individuals that are working together.
And when do companies decide to bring in somebody like yourself? Why not just hire? Like a lot of people would wonder, why don't they just hire a person and then bring them? What is the attraction of bringing in a consultant like yourself, and why is that successful for them?
Yeah. Well, okay. I'll stay off my soapbox. I mean, because
I know this is a podcast. Well, okay.
Yeah. Well, I know we talk about this all the time. I should probably preface by saying that sometimes you don't always agree with when companies make that decision between internal versus consulting. To answer your question, often you will see clients reach for consulting firms when they're faced with some kind of a crisis, whether it's a merge, a loss of a senior leader, a major disruption in the marketplace, AI, the pieces that are coming on, and they feel they don't have the in-house expertise to deal with really what they brought in. So consultants fall into a couple of categories. They can be an extra set of hands. They can be a thought partner, consultative group. That's where we land. And they can really be a booster rocket, which is not meant to be long-term, but is to get them from where they are today, which is maybe feeling like they're behind, and to help them spin up what they need and then transition up. I will say that some organizations get too dependent on consultant. I've clashed several times with my CFO friends because they have consulting groups, not to get into the nerdiness of GAAP accounting stuff, but you can often capitalize that work better. It's an external group, external actors. Bring it to the shop. And so that's gotten appeal in organizations. But what you're often losing with that, I will say, and this is coming from a consultant, is we don't have that deep knowledge of the organization. It's culture. We're good at to be fast. You have to be, or you don't do well in this industry. But there's also something to be said for someone who really knows the ground and is part of the group. There's an instant credibility there that you just can't generate, no matter how long your resume is when you're a consultant. It's a give and a take. Organizations very much have to decide. It comes down to partly how they view themselves. A lot of the really innovative shops do not use consultants because it's in their DNA to innovate in the first place. So they want that type of person in parallel. Other organizations will say, our business is X. We produce widget Y. That's what we do. And so we don't want to keep those types of folks on staff. I'll put on those leaders sometimes, though, and say, well, isn't innovation in everybody's DNA? It may look different, but isn't that part of your wheelhouse in terms of your long-term? Those are some examples of where you will see consultants brought in versus not. And again, there's as many opinions as there are people. It comes to the CEO and the board and what kind of organization you want to have. That's your North Star. Consultants are a bigger or smaller part of that, depending on that.
The confusing thing for me over the years has been the idea of being that expert coming in, and how do you merge traffic with what the client's doing and what they're up to. One of the things that I've learned in being in the service-based businesses for 25 years is that the clients are still moving. It's like jumping on a moving train. It's not where it pauses and you get on and then it slowly takes off. I've experienced those times where they bring you in and they want you to be strategic and be a consultant. They're like, well, we've already tried that idea. We tried that idea 4 years ago and it didn't work. And we tried that idea 10 years ago and it didn't work. You struggle with that initial ramp up, and that onboarding is such a barrier for some folks. In the idea of jumping into the consulting space, where do you start when you first engage with a potential client? How do you figure out if it's a good fit or not for you?
Boy, there's so much to unpack. Everything you said is true. The organization's already moved. One of the things I coach our consultants on is you have to remember all these people already had a day job before they got assigned to working with you. And so you have to bear that in mind. The biggest hallmark of success is always the effort that you're being brought in to champion. And that could be anything under the sun, from a new system to an integration to a new product rollout. Is that actually a priority within the company? I really mean with the executive leadership. More than once, we've kind of had that conversation of, hey, maybe this isn't the right time because this will never gain traction. Nor should it gain traction because you have other competing priorities that are ahead of this. And so you're just burning up funds that you shouldn't. The other piece I'll touch on there is, for lack of better terms, I'll call change management. It's a term that gets bantered around a lot, means a lot of different things to different people. You touched on that about, hey, we tried this 5 years ago, it didn't work, 10 years ago. often it's not because it was a bad idea. Full disclosure, I was a doubter of change management when the term first came around. I started my career at Accenture. We had a division there that was change management. It was change management services, CMS.
Mhm.
That's what we call it, consultants making signs. Internally, because that's as sophisticated as change management was back then. A lot of us didn't have a lot of regard. Pretty good solution, I thought. The end of it was technology or process-based or both that just bloated and got no traction and wanted us to at an organization. Logic made 100% sense, what we were talking about, and it got nowhere. And that's when I began to understand the human aspect of this. Number one, we're not rational, even close, don't even think about it. And if you didn't start to master that as a consultant or internally, frankly, it doesn't matter how good your solution. So that's the number one we focus on. Assuming those table stakes of making sure this is a priority, that's the first thing we focus on. What's their culture? What's their fears? Did this fail 5 years ago? Why? Most of the time, it's not because it was a terrible idea. It's because they never asked anybody if they were even on board with it or paid respect to the people that were going to be dealing with it. And sometimes it's that simple. No, it really is that straightforward in terms of dealing with humans and respecting them. And we're impatient at companies. We're always about the growth. We're always about moving on to the next thing. I'm certainly not patient as a human. I'm just asking the kids. But we have to take that deep pause and actually do that work of understanding how the change is going to impact them, having the dialogue, and that alone can make the huge difference between it maybe working a little bit versus being a complete disaster versus, hey, this is one of those smashing things we're really proud and the road came on.
Well, I think that's the inherent dangers of bringing in consultants and agencies and other outside services is the disruptive nature of it. And if the leadership is not prepared to manage that disruption or set expectations or set tones, you're kind of screwed before you even get started, right? And so to your point, where there's organizations that are pretty accustomed to bringing in these folks, and it's almost part of the culture that there's always a new face on a Zoom call because that's just part of who they are. They're always bringing in and swapping out Lego pieces to make new, versus maybe a fast growing or newer company. Some of those people have been there from the beginning and they might feel a little threatened by a consultancy or an outside force coming in to help accelerate things. So to your point, I think the most successful consultants, people driven first, solutions second, because again, to your point, if I can't get the people on board, what's the point of the solution? Nobody's going to do anything. I used to coach a lot of my directors back at my business. There's lots of times where you can be completely in the right and standing on a big pile of rubble, and it doesn't help anyone, right?
Congratulations, you were dead. So some of the first consulting, first coaching that we give is often not an intended target. It's actually to the sponsor in terms of here's how to get this out of the gate properly. Here's how to set the tone for introducing us in a way that, and it's self-serving, right? I mean, we want this to be an engagement that works well and it makes it better for us, but it's also going to pay dividends to the sponsor and to the group. We'll accomplish it and we'll also have far less broken glass along the way by doing it that way. That's point blank. I've been 10 years. I'm an expert in this. At least some people have used more colorful language than that. I'll be honest.
I'm sure.
That's where I think you get mediocre versus real consulting. The stereotype is the consultant who's arrogant, who just comes in with the big four banner on their briefcase or shoulder. I work here, I make this, so therefore you would listen to me. If you're good at your craft, it's really about, okay, I heard everything you just said. Maybe I can help you get the traction that you couldn't get before. Because a criticism rooted at leaders, and I think it's fair sometimes, which is, you wouldn't listen to us internally for 10 years, but you listen to these folks right away. And now, again, some degree it's fair. I also tell folks, the time I'm not looking at you, part of what I do is go to conferences. I do research. Part of our job is to stay up to date on things that you simply don't have time to, and you shouldn't have to. That's part of fractional. So it's a bit of that. But yeah, sometimes it is some coaching to leadership of your solutions are right here. Maybe they're not being pitched to you in the right way. In your defense, they're probably not speaking in a way that's resonating with you. So we can do some coaching there. But you've got some really good people here. Let's change the processes. Let's change some culting so that you leverage them better. I think the best consulting shops are really good at working themselves right out of the job that they're brought into. Sometimes they need to throw them into the next thing, and that's fine. But that's real high value consulting. And yes, there are so many memes of where it doesn't happen right, but you could also say that about attorneys and other things too. I think we can safely say that there's plenty of good ones. Good leads.
That's right. There's plenty of good ones. But that's the point where I've run into my personal journey in consulting and coaching is that double-edged sword you've talked about, is that I do have to initially show up as the all-knowing oracle to get the CEOs, founders, whoever to say, okay, this guy knows what he's talking about. But then you have to immediately switch context into, well, I'm humble and I'm here to learn from all of you, to learn about your business and all the intricacies of it. And it's been a struggle initially because in those initial coaching calls, they'll bring, or those initial pitch calls to like, is he going to be a good fit? You got some team members on the call, right? Sit there and you have to talk about your bona fides and your history. You have to bring out your best quotes and you just show up really big. I can see that would turn off some of the team members, even though you're like, once I'm in there, like then but to your point, if I would have known earlier in my career how much therapy this work is versus just doing work, like making spreadsheets, plans and strategies, there's just so much more therapy and empathy that has to go into it to make it successful.
It is. And I like to say there's the 2 C's. And the good news is they are not mutually exclusive. They're halves of the same coin. If you use them, I always like to think that thing of coin, right? It's end over end over end, almost the point of being a blur. I think you can bring these both together in an initial conversation and be successful. They are confidence and curiosity. I know what I'm doing or I wouldn't be here. No, this is what I do. I do it well, but I'm curious about your world because just because something fits in one place doesn't mean it fits here. Or it doesn't, it's a perfectly square thing to a round hole. It's an octagon to it. So it's going to be some shaping that makes it effective for yours. And I think you're bringing both those at the same time of saying, here's how we do this, but here's why I want to learn about you and your role. It's a couple. It's making it beginnings of the tailoring of the solution for them. It's a bit of an homage to their world and their culture and the fact that it deserves respect, understood.
Mm-hmm.
And frankly, think it's more fun too. I mean, I get so tired of the sound of my own voice when we're doing a seminar. I want to hear from them. I want to hit their idea. Frankly, often not, it informs me in learning too. The good consultants, assuming you've got some degree of confidence in your own world, there's nothing wrong with saying I'm learning here too. In fact, that's the best kind of thing that when we all work together. It's to get people on board. Push week speaking for that, but it's also for their best interest in yours too. But that confidence and curiosity together, again, they're not mutually exclusive. I think they go hand in glove. Works really well.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's the problem that some consultants, when they're maybe marketing themselves, they focus a little bit too much on that side of things and less, because what a client is buying is they want an outcome, right? They're looking for an outcome. They're not looking for necessarily just like, they want to know that you know what you're doing and they want an outcome. I see too many consultants talk about their approach and they're like, oh, yeah, sure, great, you've got an approach. But speaking more about the actual outcome that you provide when they work with you, and is that equal to the value of what you're charging, right? Because I'm sure you've run into it too many times where I'm like, yeah, well, yes, it will cost you about 1% of your gross revenue for the year to hire me. Is that worth growing your company by 20%? Is that a good trade-off? And some people are like, yeah, but there's no guarantees. And I'm like, well, what guarantees is there? I mean, if you don't bring me on.
Exactly. It's a couple of things. I agree with you completely. I mean, partly that curiosity piece that, here's the outcome. That's more of a back and forth. You can't put that on a glossy. It's really hard. It's an interactive piece. So I understand why a lot of people probably don't have as much to that as they need to. it's harder to that out. And of course, you want to sell stuff because you like to get paid. And part of the piece does come down to as well. It's really sometimes difficult to have a hard cause and effect between. You put a system in place. Yes, I mean, you expect some amount of labor savings or this amount of decrease in your tech overhead or what have you. Those hard savings are fairly easy to calculate. Cultural improvements, communication improvements, you can take swings at it when you got this many people, if they're wasting this much time in meetings or infighting. Here's a number, but it's hard to say then, okay, now we've eradicated that much of it, because it's not like you exactly did a survey to find out you're wasting this many hours per week. It doesn't work that way. So it does. Right. And that's where the relationship building comes into, and people really not just managing by numbers. And so this is sometimes where maybe a client isn't a good fit, in my opinion, but they're also managing by their culture and doing your Six Sigma guy and Gemba walk of walking around and seeing, is the friction increasing? Is the temperature coming down? Are people talking to each other more? All those are indicators that we're moving in the right way. And here's the big one to me. Do I trust this consultant enough that he or she will say, hey, I think my value here is running its course in what we're talking about. Now, they may say there's 3 other areas I think I can be valuable for. It's for what you bought me in on. I think move the needle as much as we can, or as much as I have. Now, for reasons of change management, some of this must come from you internally to make it yours and make it real. I think that sometimes comes down to a trust factor. The clients, we all start with not knowing each other. So of course, there's a beginning. But as it goes, that has to be there. I hire consultants. Done it before. The people I trust the most were the ones that told me it was time to wind it down.
Yeah.
Then we're thinking longer term at that point.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I feel the challenge there, but the big challenge, but big reward, right? And that's like anything in life when it comes to the types of work that we do. What would be your advice to somebody maybe who's listening to this and thinking about, okay, maybe I want to move out of my corporate world and move into consulting and coaching? What would be some of the first things that you would want them to consider or question before they made that leap?
Sure. So the first would be, okay, so as you say, I want to move out of where I am internally. We'll just use that term very broadly. And I want to become an external act. The first question I have is, how do you want to do that? Do you like working independently and owning that relationship with the client and building your business pipeline, et cetera, depending on what level you're at, a fractional type persona, or working with maybe a Genesis 10 helps match you with client? If you really do like the team sport aspect of your work, you love working with people, bouncing ideas, etc., then you might want to look to more of a management consulting type firm. There's quite a few very, very ones out there. And there are, at that point, you're going to, if you've never been a consultant before, one challenge you'll have faced is the fact that this is an industry that a lot of people won't shop at, because you're going into things new. You have your bearings. You got to have an ability to come up very quickly to speed with something. So that'll be the story you're going to need to be able to tell to recruiters of one of those organizations. Yes, I've been internal all these years, but because of the way I shifted around or whatever, or maybe the work you as an advisor, external to, if you're part of the Minnesota Cup or something like that. This is why I do have that consultative mindset, but I want to work with a team too. And that's why so that'd be my advice with that. But it's got to be a fit for you and where you go. My caution to anybody who's looking at it, even let's say you're wildly successful at it, the one drawback to consulting is it is some degrees a bit of a mercenary existence. I mean, you almost never get to see your baby grow up. You're there to help, and then you move on your way. Now, I've built wonderful relationships over the years. I read about my baby in the Wall Street Journal, but that is one aspect of a career, and it's all good to make money. But at the end of the day, we're spending all this time on ourselves. I think we all really want to leave footsteps that we like and we want to look back on. You do have to ask yourself if that aspect of consulting, the fact that I'm the problem solver and stuff, that is enough for the fact that you won't be the owner of the solution. And there's no right or wrong there other than how well you feel about it at the end of the day. So that's my advice for somebody with it.
No, thank you for that. I agree. Like, you've got to be prepared for those. It's just a different set of challenges. I mean, if you think one job, it's easier being a consultant than being an executive in an organization. It's different colored water. Or the grass is greener, it's not greener, it's just a different shade.
Yeah, it's a different set of challenges, a different set of rewards. There's an adrenaline rush with consulting. As you fix things, you dive in, you turn around the impossible. There's an adrenaline rush of building something or looking back on it and saying, wow, we 10 people, now we've got 200. Neither is right or wrong, but they're different. And not everybody values them the same. That's the thing I think everybody has to ask themselves as they look at that. There's no wrong answer, but it's got to be right for you.
Ryan, thank you so much for taking the time to join me. I learned so much in general here. If I want to get in touch with you, if I want to learn more about the business you do and the work you're doing with the Minnesota Cup and those sorts of things, where do I go? Where do I follow your work?
I'm out there on LinkedIn, like 99% of the population. I think Ryan Schaffer 77 is my tag on there because there's a lot of Ryan Schaffers in the world. So that's the best way to start a conversation, reach out. I love the connections. Be very happy to talk anytime about consulting or Minnesota Cup or anything else. This is a great big world and it's really built on our people and relationships. So happy to do so. Likewise, Kurt, really enjoyed the conversation. Thinking this is fun. Enjoy, and hopefully there's some value to it for something.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, we'd love it if you left a review on iTunes or Spotify. It makes a big difference. And be sure to check out schmidtconsulting.group for more ideas and insights. Remember, every big dream starts with a single step. Keep moving forward, stay curious, and don't forget, we're rooting for you. See you next time.